Yeah, no, good. It's a good point. We need to get to a point where the phraseology of superwoman rolls off the
Yeah.
tongue as easily as Superman, right?
Yep.
All right, I want to shift gears a little bit to back to SR1 and what it's doing in the biotech and biopharma space. That's unique from my perspective. A lot of VC firms, I haven't had a ton on the show. A lot of times I'll have a managing partner along with a biotech that they've funded. We've done that a few times. That's always a fun conversation. But I haven't had a ton. But from my perspective, anecdotally, a lot of the VC firms that I see out there are a little bit more niche in terms of where their focus is. They'll focus on, the biotech, startup seed phase. They'll focus maybe on taking a company from, formation to phase one studies, or they'll say, "Hey, we're the capital partner that you need to work your way towards acquisition or merger." SR1, on the other hand, in conversation with you claim this kind of complete continuum, right? Approach from startup
Yep.
to commercialization. So tell me a little bit more about that. Like, why is that? Why not just focus on one sort of, phenotype, to use your word, of company, or uh, why, why take on that breadth, I guess?
Yeah. Again, going back to first principles, Matt, I'd say generally don't like to do anything that's just completely straightforward.
Mm,
There's a belief that I have, that the firm has, that we want to be truly elite. And to be elite, in my mind, you need to have a holistic understanding of this ecosystem and industry. And it's hard, in my opinion, to have that mindset or visibility if you're just focusing in on one particular segment. And, again, the example of the way that we've learned about some of these seed investments that we've done in gene editing has come from the experience of being in leadership roles and having invested through the various stages of CRISPR from start all the way through to where it is today, and seeing where CRISPR is today. What are the bottlenecks? Again, delivery, whole gene insertion, more a milder preconditioning regimen. That insight has led to early stage seed investments. And
mm,
so we're not claiming to be, again, there's amazing firms that all they do is start companies. We're not claiming to have the resources or capabilities just to do that. But when we start a company or when we seed an investment, it is driven in some part by an insight that we have from having that arc of investing experience and understanding of where the landscape is or where it's going. So that's the first point, is we believe that there is an edge that we can glean from having an end-to-end capability. The second point hones in on the team aspect, which we've talked about, which is we genuinely think of ourselves as one team, one dream. And we can get into logistics because we are spread out. But what that means is there needs to be, for that first point to hold, where you can take the learnings, there needs to be the right level of organizational design, crosstalk, collaboration that's happening so that the organization can benefit from that, right? So we lean into that part of the way that we work to facilitate the learnings and create the edge. So those are the two strategic points. The third is, it's frankly tactical, which is, we fundamentally believe that if you have that end-to-end approach and capabilities and edge in any market cycle, whether it's risk on or risk off, you will be able to find attractive investments that can generate outsized returns. And so you're not dependent on, again, the markets being, completely open to early stage and, money flowing into that segment. There might be later stage deals that are more attractive from a risk entry point. And so we think, on balance, like, the two strategic reasons plus the tactical reason makes for a compelling way to build a fund and a franchise over time.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm sold. That was a fantastic response. I like that perspective response. Being able to fill gaps. I mean, and it
Yeah.
speaks to the mission too. Like, it speaks directly back to the mission. Like, what do
Yeah.
we need to invest in right now to make what we've already seen through to commercialization better, more effective, more efficient? That's great. But you mentioned the logistics. You mentioned geographies. You guys are split between London and San Francisco. So tell me a little bit about that. What's advantageous about having? Are you in San Francisco now? You
I'm in
personally
London,
right
right?
now? Yeah.
I'm in London right now.
Oh, you're in London right now. Okay.
Yeah.
You spend most of
Yeah.
your time there.
I'm going back and forth. So that's one of the challenges or blessings, I guess, depending on how you look at it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you can
Yeah.
pick worse cities. But what's advantageous about having? I mean, I've had conversations about the investment scene and innovation specific to Europe, and I've had conversations about how that's different in the States. Where there's different sort of focus in the States. So I'm assuming answer my own question. One of the advantages is the kind of holistic view of what's going on there and what's going on here.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, again, it just broadens out the network, right? So I talked about the importance of network in the way that we think about, ultimately getting to the most compelling founders, entrepreneurs, startups. So having a foot on both sides of the Atlantic gives us, we believe, an edge relative to a US focused investment firm. It's also just, again, I go back to, again, the way that SR1 is organized. We have incredible talent on my team that is based in the UK or in Europe. And having those people, without those people here, I'm not sure we would be set up this way, right? So not only is the investing team a meaningful portion based here, but the operations team, including our CFO, who's one of the most talented people that I work with, full stop, is based here in the UK office. And so it's really to be able to cultivate a way of working together that allows for people to sort of have their personal preferences for where they want to live, coupled with, again, the mission of SR1 to invest in these geographies. I think those are really the two major reasons that we've done it. And it's also been the case, while it's, again, logistically challenging setting up meetings, across these time zones, we've found a way to make it work. We have enough connectivity in the way that teams are organized when they're evaluating companies, working with portfolio companies. We probably have 2 or 3 times during a year where the core team is together between JP Morgan or other conferences or board meetings where we're all, for example, in Boston. So we have to invest in this. There's a cost associated with it. We think on balance, it makes sense for us. It's worth it. But it does add a complexity to what we do. And, I want to acknowledge that it's not without friction that comes with the setup.
Sure. Yeah. One of the other advantages that occurs to me is that you've got an ear to the ground on where the money's coming from, the flow of money, the interest levels in each space. So can you share any one, is that true? And two, what trends or observations can you share about the way that money is and has been flowing in Europe versus the States?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely been, I'd say over my investing career, it's been, an order of magnitude difference in terms of just the amount of capital that flows into biotech relative to US, right, in Europe. And, my experience has been that for the most part, European biotechs have been more drip-fed capital, incremental amount of capital infusions to get to the next milestone. And you could argue in the US, maybe companies have been overfed at time and there's indigestion that comes from overfeeding. But I'd say over the last few years, there's just more activity here in Europe. We've always known there's high quality science here, great institutions. The pedigree is as good as we see in the US, but there's now more capital, certainly from us and from other large players, flowing into this ecosystem on the private side. And so I think that's a reason to be optimistic. But the reality is, at least based on July 31st, while we're recording this podcast, the public markets are largely US based for all of these startups, wherever they're, like CRISPR is a good example, Swiss based company that is now listed on NASDAQ, has operations in the US. So the flow of capital on the private side, I wouldn't say it's even, but it's starting to rebalance in a way that's favorable to Europe. But as you skew towards later stage and the public markets, all of the major action happens in the US, and I don't see that changing for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. We're running short on time here, Simeon, but before I get to my final question for you, which is the hardest question to answer, what haven't I asked you? What haven't I asked you that you think would be valuable information for our audience of biotech builders?
I mean, I'd say again, like, find sort of the purpose, the calling for why the entrepreneur, the founder, the startup exists. Like, why do you exist? And if you can be really aligned with that mission and focus on that, everything else you will be able to work through it. You'll have that sort of mindset. You'll have the resilience and belief in what you're doing. And again, nothing is easy nothing great is easy. And so, I'm inspired every time I meet entrepreneurs and founders that are on that journey, that have that belief system on what they're working on. And, so I wish everyone all the best and as much luck as they can garner also.
Well, you answered the last question I was going to ask you. So yeah, the last question I was going to ask you is the hardest question to answer. And that's, this pithy and meaningful piece of advice. So I don't have a last question to ask you. That was it.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't know that was coming. I mean, I'd say to sum it up, it's find ways to increase your luck surface area. I heard this phrase, luck surface area, and I love it. It's like, do whatever you can. It requires inspiration, perspiration, preparation, but increase your luck surface area over time and put yourself in position to get lucky. That's what I say to myself and my team, frankly, whenever we're together. Like that's one of the key ways that you put you hopefully are successful.
Yeah, I like that. Can you attribute that quote to someone, or does it escape you?
I can't remember.
I don't know if someone deserves credit for that.
Yeah, it's definitely not my quote. I read it somewhere, and if I find it, I will let you know, Matt. But it's certainly not my quote. But I love it.
It's a good one. It's a good one. That's a perfect one to end on. I really appreciate you coming on, Simeon. This has been a pleasure. I've enjoyed talking with you. I think it's been super insightful for our audience, and hopefully we can have you back on when we can share more on great things that companies within the SR1 portfolio are doing.
I'd love to know. Thank you. It's been a fun conversation, and I'd love to come back on and maybe we bring an entrepreneur with me also that we've worked with. That'll be fun.